What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the Hater, and it's time for yet another episode of Hater Outdoors. It seems like more and more I like doing things outdoors, but I'm sure as the winter approaches, that's not going to be sustainable when it gets cold up in this place. But with that being said, let's get to the video at hand. Dynamite review. All right, I just finished watching AEW Dynamite, and I got some thoughts. Let's go through it match by match, segment by segment. The show starts out with MJF. He does a little pose and an American flag with his faces on it appears. It's a little tacky, but I like it. You know what I mean? This is my favorite version of MJF, you know? Going from just a cocky wrestler to a cocky American, kind of, I think is a step in the right direction for this jobber, you know? Pardon me. The first match of the night is going to be MJF versus the star of the Xanarkin Abes, Titus from Final Fantasy X, also known as Kyle Fletcher. He comes out and he looks like Will Ospreay mixed with Titus. So he comes out, he's got that same haircut, you know what I mean? Will Ospreay's in the back watching this match. The match starts, the match goes, the match ends. Here's how it ends. Basically, Don Callis comes out and distracts referee throwing a screwdriver for Kyle Fletcher to use on MJF. Now, you would think that MJF, being the dastardly heel that he is, and screwing over Kyle Fletcher's buddy, Will Ospreay, you would think that, you know, Kyle Fletcher would be justified in using the screwdriver, but that's not what happens. He picks it up, he second guesses himself, he drops it, and that's all she wrote. MJF hits him with a low blow, hits the kangaroo kick, which I think is a great move, and then hits him with the brain buster and pins him. Then he afterwards proceeds to beat the hell out of him post-match, right? Will Ospreay comes in and stops the beating, but think about that. It's like either you use the screwdriver or you don't. Just don't hesitate, because then a beating is coming your way. So, I mean, it was a long match, and it got me thinking. It's like everybody knew watching this match, obviously MJF is going to win, right? It's like it's a no-brainer. So I came up with a paradigm, if you will, right? I believe that no wrestling match should exceed 7 minutes flat unless one of the following things is happening. Number one, it's a match where we don't know who the winner is going to be, like reasonably so, right? Or two, it's a match with significant consequences. Now, ideally, it should combine both of those two things. It should be a match where we don't know how it's going to end, and there are significant consequences, because as we're going to see later in the night, we had other matches that were long. We didn't know who was going to win, but nobody cares who the winner is going to be. So then we move on. I think the next segment that we had was Brian Keith versus Katsuyori Shibata. Nothing to write home about here. You know, Katsuyori Shibata is, out there just doing his thing. This guy's best known for almost ending his own career by headbutting Okada. He beats Brian Keith relatively easily. He does like the Von Erich claw into an armbar and makes him tap. Then he gets attacked post-match. I think he gets saved. Oh, that's right. Hook comes back, and like, it's just ridiculous at this point. Like, you know, when I said Hook was great a few years ago, I was expecting him to like muscle up a little bit, but he's the same size he's always been, right? And it's like, you're in there with Jericho, who's taller than him, and you're in there with Big Bill, who's like twice his size, literally, right? So it's like, it's not believable that this guy can clear the ring from Jericho and Big Bill. Speaking of size disparities, Kyle Fletcher, Titus himself, was like a foot taller than MJF, right? Kyle Fletcher is presented as this like Will Ospreay-esque wrestler, right? Like this like high-flying type of guy, right? But he's also big and strong. So it's like, if you compare him to MJF in the ring, you know, it's evident that Kyle Fletcher, fuck, I choked, motherfuckers, that Kyle Fletcher is obviously the better wrestler, right? However, as we've established many, many times on this channel, the mic skills and all the other stuff plays a huge factor. And Kyle Fletcher hasn't had the opportunity to do any of that stuff, so we'll see, you know what I mean? But by no circumstance should the wrestlers be this small, especially like MJF, who for better or for worse, even though he's a mid-card champion, he is a main eventer, you know what I mean? Next we have, or maybe before this, I don't know, we had Mariah May versus some broad named Viva Van, right? Which just sounds silly, right? Obviously, Mariah May beats her ass. I really like Mariah May. I think Mariah May is my favorite female wrestler right now, right? Because of two reasons. Number one, she's extremely good looking. But that's not why I like her, right? Because that's not important, you know what I mean? Like, that's important for marketability, but I don't care about that kind of stuff personally. But I will say this. She has the look, And the gimmick is perfect, right? Because she's the glamour Mariah May, right? She's supposed to be this like good-looking woman, but the underpinnings of the gimmick are that she's not that, right? That she's this rough and tough girl. Her finishing moves are like a fucking, first, I mean, she does the Toni Storm finisher, the Storm Zero, but she has like that running knee which just looks brutal, and the cradle shock, which is silly. But basically her matches are like, she just beats the shit out of people, right? Then afterwards she attacks him with like the heel of her stiletto. So it's like, this is like really interesting as a gimmick because it's like, she's the glamour, but she wrestles in this like weird, believable, scrappy way, right? Almost like a Liv Morgan, but better in every capacity. Now, another thing that I want to point out about Mariah May in this segment, and also this storyline with Toni Storm in general, is that periodically, like I remember a time in WWE, I think it was Raw, where all of a sudden Victoria, despite being a jobber for like 3 years, she starts racking up some wins, right? And she establishes herself as the #1 contender for like Candice Michelle's title. I don't forget who the champion was, right? But the point is, all of a sudden, Victoria, like, even though she's been losing for like 2 or 3 years, all of a sudden she starts winning matches, right? And it's just explained by like Victoria as a beast. But you can't do that, right? You have to give me a reason as to why this person all of a sudden is good, right? With Mariah May, it makes sense, right? Because she's just this savage. You know, so like she wins the matches by just brutality. You know, Victoria would win the matches with wrestling moves. So it wasn't quite believable because it's like, well, if you could do this whole time, why are you losing to Natalya for 2 years? And now you beat Natalya in like a 3-minute match, right? Same thing with a lot of wrestlers that all of a sudden get a push and they're good, right? You have to have a reason, you have to have an explanation as to why did this person go from being a jobber to once again being a main eventer, and vice versa, right? Like, for example, Kevin Owens was a main eventer at one point, then he became a jobber, but nobody explained why. It's not like anybody around him was elevated, right? You know what I mean? It's not like there were like fewer main eventers, it's just that he was put in the mid-card and AJ Styles was the champion, and he was wrestling like Dean Ambrose and John Cena and things like that, and you know, Kevin Owens was stuck wrestling like Luke Harper, you know? So these things need an explanation. I know they seldom get one, but in this case, it's getting one, right? So like the idea that Mariah May is ready for a title shot makes sense because she's like this brutal new character. So I enjoyed this segment based on that. She gets attacked by Toni Storm, who now looks like Harley Quinn will in the new movie with Lady Gaga, you know? So it is what it is. I'm not looking forward to the match. I don't care enough, but it's interesting, right? Next up, we have Orange Cassidy comes out, and he and FTR are gonna wrestle Roosh, Roderick Strong. I don't know why Roderick Strong isn't teaming up with, Taven and Bennett, but he's not. Maybe they're injured. They were there in ringside. I don't know, and I don't care. And a guy named Beast Mortos, right? I'm pretty sure Beast Mortos is Black Taurus, but I could be wrong. If he's not, they should put him in a tag team with Black Taurus and just give him like a goofy-ass name. But they have this long-ass match, right? And this is the other problem that I had. This match is meaningless. Nobody cares who wins this match. I kind of had an idea that it was going to be FTR and Orange Cassidy because the other 3 guys are catastrophic level jobbers. But it wouldn't be shocking if like Taurus or whatever, Mordos got the pin, or if Roderick Strong got the pin. It wouldn't be crazy, right? But that's just not what happened. But the match was long, so it's like, it's this meaningless match that's long, but, you know, like nobody cares. Instead of having like Christian and the patriarchy on the show, they're gonna put them on Saturday nights, but it doesn't make any sense to me. But nevertheless, after this, we have like a little showdown between FTR and the Acclaimed. Like, in my opinion, the Acclaimed are just superior to FTR in every possible way. So I don't even know why FTR has to hold these guys back, right? There's a part where the bald one, I never got their names. I think it's Cash Wheeler's the other one, Dax. When Dax Harwood gets the mic, and he starts trying to cut a promo, but he's shit on the mic, and he basically says, oh, we're not as eloquent as you guys, but we're real men. So he basically implies that being eloquent is not being a real man. Well, I got news for you. Number 1, of course the Acclaimed are more eloquent. Number 2, who established that Dax and Cash are more men than the Acclaimed? The Acclaimed are young guys who are fit, good looking, and charismatic. FTR are older guys who are fat and not charismatic. So it's just the fact that they say they're more manly that makes them positioned to be more manly, right? They're not actually more manly, so I didn't really like that at all. I also don't care too much about the feud. Then we had a handicap match. It's like Camille's debut, I believe. I've seen Camille. in NWA like a few times, and she's always stood out. She's very tall, she's very attractive, and in my opinion, she fits in nicely in this Jade Cargill role. You know what I mean? Jade Cargill, in my opinion, has more star power. And Jade Cargill is also obviously an attractive woman, but I think Camille is more attractive, but she just has less star power. Like, Jade Cargill is one of those few wrestlers where you see them and you're like, this person needs to be a star. You know, it's very rare, motherfuckers. Very, very rare. Like, she's like 1 in 1,000, you know what I mean, in terms of wrestling. Like, you get 1,000 wrestlers, Jade Cargill is going to be the one that has the most star power, but she's being completely and utterly wasted in WWE. I feel like another draft is around the corner, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, all the draft picks were just like a complete waste, but I feel like there's going to be a draft in the next few months before they go to Netflix, you know? So, whatever, right? Camille wins. She beats 2 jobbers. She hits like a sit-out dominator, and then she does the torture rack bomb and pins them both, right? Next up, we have like the main event. Jeff Jarrett versus Bryan Danielson, right? Now, this whole story of this match is Bryan Danielson's like last ride, basically, right? Like, he's having a career versus title match against Swerve at the pay-per-view. But even if he wins, he's basically said he's not going to be a wrestler full-time anymore. So it doesn't really matter. But, I mean, there's no way that Daniel Bryan is retiring after this. Swerve might win, but I have a feeling that Daniel Bryan is going to be one of these guys like fucking Dynamite Kid that like just gets crippled before he quits, right? He's going to be like a Jeff Jarrett, but he doesn't have the longevity of Jeff Jarrett. And that's another thing that I wanted to put the focus on a little bit here, man. Jeff Jarrett, a wild slapnuts appears, as Marky D would say, you know? And that's a good point. Jeff Jarrett is always fucking around doing something. If this asshole's not wrestling, he's in the back baking muffins or something. But that's irrespective of the fact that Jeff Jarrett is a bona fide legend. If you consider that Jeff Jarrett was old, in like he was like older-ish 20 years ago when TNA started, you know? Like, he was like almost 40 back when he was like, you know, pretty much carrying TNA on his back along with AJ Styles, right? Back then he was old and he's still kicking, you know? He's still wrestling, he can still put on long matches. Jeff Jarrett, in terms of career longevity, is up there with like Sting and Undertaker, you know what I mean? Like, he is incredible. You know, Jeff Jarrett is a bona fide legend, and I'm very happy that he got into the Hall of Fame in WWE, right? The match is pretty good. It ends with a Daniel Bryan hitting a Buzaiku knee. I mean, pretty good considering what it is, right? Daniel Bryan hits the Buzaiku knee and pins him. Swerve comes out. Swerve is massively over. You could say whatever the hell you want, but that's just how it is, right? I don't want to say I'm starting to get it, right? Because I think Swerve is overrated still. But he does carry himself like a champion, right? He's not insecure about the fact that he's champion. Like, if you compare him to Cody Rhodes, you get so much more confidence out of Swerve, right? Like, Swerve, as a character at least, believes, it's believable, I should say, that Swerve believes that he is the best wrestler in the world. With Cody Rhodes, it just feels like Cody Rhodes doubts himself. You know, Cody Rhodes is always surprised. Every match, something happens that surprises this cocksucker, right? Every SmackDown, it seems, something happens that surprises this cocksucker. And if they don't surprise him, it surprises the viewer, right? Like, he's getting tied up in the ropes and they're going to destroy Randy Orton and he says, take me instead. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Randy Orton punted you in the head, you know what I mean? But that's not here nor there. We're talking about Swerve here. Now, Swerve is entertaining in his own right, you know, for what he is. But, earlier in the night, Swerve also had an interview with JR. JR has lost like 70 pounds. He looks great in his body, but he's also starting to look really old. You know, I fear for JR. I'm not saying he's going to die, but it's like he was a little slower and he just doesn't feel like he wants to be there. So it's like, just let the man retire, you know what I mean? I don't even think he has one more WrestleMania match in him to like call it with the enthusiasm of JR, because he's just not enthused. It just seems like he's tired, motherfucks. I actually was a little bit worried, but he looks good in terms of like physically. He's like clearly lost a lot of weight. So I do like that. Hopefully he lives for many, many years. But it's also possible that he just doesn't give a shit about AEW, because how could anyone do that? And maybe he's just so demoralized that it seems like he's just like tired of it, but maybe he's just bored, right? And in this interview, Swerve Strickland says basically that his match with Daniel Bryan is about more than the world title, that his match is about legacy. And it got me thinking, remember that I don't know what pay-per-view it was, but the one where it was like Cena versus Bray Wyatt, and the theme song of the pay-per-view was, "This is my legacy, legacy." And the storyline was John Cena versus Bray Wyatt. It's for Cena's legacy. right? And it's like Bray Wyatt was trying to turn Cena heel, basically, right? And it's like, will Cena do it? Well, what will his legacy mean? John Cena has main evented like 15 WrestleManias. John Cena is a 16-time world champion. Are you kidding me? And like, we're supposed to believe that if he loses to Bray Wyatt, his legacy is somehow tarnished? Like, nobody's gonna give a shit next month if Bray Wyatt beats him, you know what I mean? So it's silly, and this is silly the same way, right? If Swerve Strickland beats Daniel Bryan and retires him, this has no impact at all on Daniel Bryan's legacy, because whether we like it or not, and the hater hates it, Daniel Bryan beat Triple H, he beat Batista, and he beat Randy Orton with all the deck stacked against him in one night, and became the WWE champion at WrestleMania. You know what I mean? So the notion, like the logic that Daniel Bryan's legacy can somehow ever be tarnished by a loss to a guy whose highest career achievement before coming to AEW was being the North American champion in NXT, surrounded by Hit Row, is just absurd, right? It's just absurd. It would be like if, I don't know, if The Rock had a program with like Bully Ray when Bully Ray was being pushed, and Bully Ray said, if I beat you, Rock, your legacy is tarnished. And it's like, all right, I can appreciate what you've done here, Bully Ray. And let's be honest, Swerve Strickland is no Bully Ray. But he could say, I can appreciate what you've done here, but know your role and shut your mouth. I'm still The Rock. You know what I mean? The Rock is still The Rock, and Bully Ray is still Bully Ray. Likewise, even though I don't have to like it, Daniel Bryan is still Daniel Bryan, and Swerve Strickland is still Swerve Strickland. He's a cruiserweight jobber. Now, so is Daniel Bryan, but nevertheless, Daniel Bryan has beaten real wrestlers. And this is further emphasized when Swerve Strickland gets to the ring, and he says, like, Daniel, you know, we have three, like, TNT legends here. We've got Jeff Jarrett, we've got Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who was doing commentary, and we have me. And the difference between us and you is that you haven't been champion here. Like, at this point, if Daniel Bryan was allowed to say whatever the fuck he wanted, he could have done what Jericho did to, like, Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase. He could have been like, first of all, let me remind you of something. I've won more titles than both of your fathers and you combined. You know what I'm saying? Like, this idea, they're like, oh, our fathers were legends, and your father was like a hockey jobber, basically. And Jericho put them in their place immediately. They're like, despite the fact that you guys are here through nepotism, your jobber-ass fathers never achieved 1/10 of what Jericho achieved, right? And none of those guys combined are ever going to achieve what Jericho achieved. So it's like, you know, so know your role, basically. Like, who do you think you're talking to, right? Daniel Bryan could have done the same thing, but then they would have to acknowledge WWE. Daniel Bryan could have just said, well, last time I checked, none of you guys ever won anything at WrestleMania. Maybe Jeff Jarrett, I think he won like a tag match or something, you know? But it's like, none of you guys have ever, has anyone here competed at WrestleMania? And then he'd be like, well, Ricky has, and Jeff Jarrett has, but you haven't, Swerve. You were in the company, but you never even made it to WrestleMania. Whereas I main evented WrestleMania, beating three bona fide Hall of Famers in the first in the first match and in the main event, right? So it's like this notion that like somehow Swerve has anything over Bryan is just silly. The match here should just be like Swerve not trying to demean Daniel Bryan, but saying like, look, I'm gonna make my name by beating you, right? That should be the storyline. Swerve Strickland instead is saying, I've made my name and I'm gonna ruin your name, right? Which is silly because he can't, right? No matter what happens, he can't. Even if he retires Daniel Bryan, like, I could see this being like Daniel Bryan retires and then he shows up part-time in WWE. Like, that's going to happen. He's going to go back at some point. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like that's where it's headed at the end of the day, you know? So, it is what it is, but that's where we find ourselves, right? Like, there's all these people pretending to retire, and Daniel Bryan, like, I just don't see it happening, you know what I mean? Like, you think he's going to end his career in AEW? Like, I feel like even Sting might come back for like one more match like next year or something. Like, it's just hard to believe that any wrestler would end their career in AEW, right? Like, even Hulk Hogan has gone on record and said like, oh man, like my last match was in TNA and like I don't know how I feel about that, right? So, you know, and Hulk Hogan's like 70, so I could see him coming out of retirement doing one more match. Not at Mania probably, but actually why not, you know? Hulk Hogan and like, I don't know, fucking Braun Breaker or something versus like Gunther and Kaiser Ludwig or Ludwig Kaiser, you know, something like that. I could see something like that happening one day, you know, Hogan does the leg drop, everyone pops, whatever. But the point is, I'm not looking forward to this pay-per-view, and I thought that this episode of AEW was a step back once again, you know. They need to go back to what worked, and that is blood and guts, right? Like, they need to have those people wrestle, because those people tore it up. You know, like, where are the Young Cucks? Where is Jack Perry, right? Like, it's been 2 weeks now. I want to hear from them, you know? This idea that, like, wrestlers can lose and then take some time off is counterintuitive. Like, it might work for like Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, but that's it, motherfucks. It doesn't work for anybody else. It doesn't quite work, if you will, for people that you expect to see again. Like, it doesn't work for Cookie Rhodes. Like, you know, when Cookie Rhodes loses his title, he's going to take off a month at minimum. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work for everybody, right? Look at Damian Priest. This is like how you get someone over, right? Damian Priest lost the title. He's back already, right? He's back for his next program. You know? Get me to my next job, motherfucks. And with that being said, I got to give this episode a relatively low score. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. You know, it was not good. And honestly, if I'm being honest, I mean, even a 3 is kind of generous, but like, we've seen worse. It's a 3 because like Daniel Bryan and Jeff Jarrett, just seeing Jeff Jarrett, I think makes it a 3 because otherwise nothing memorable happened. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just a filler episode, if you will. And that's one problem that we've had with wrestling for a while now, is filler episodes. And we shouldn't have as many. You know what I'm saying? That being said, Cucks, take care of yourselves.